Good morning, everybody. If you brought a Bible, I'd love for you to turn to John chapter 15. John 15, we're here in John 15 because we're in a series called Red Letters, where we're simply looking at a section of the Bible in most of your study Bibles that's all red letters. The red letters are the words that Jesus spoke. It's not words describing Jesus or words about what he said. It's his actual words. If you were here last week for week 1, you know that we preached John 14, where Jesus said, "Do not let your hearts be troubled." That'll preach, right? Because there's so much trouble in our midst, in our world today. And Jesus says, he said, "Do not let your hearts be troubled," not because everything's going to work out smoothly. He said, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house, there are many rooms. I go to prepare a place for you." Jesus is trying to get us to think about our troubles, as Paul would later say, as momentary light afflictions in light of the eternal weight of glory. We can believe him. We can trust him, and it comes down to a relationship. John 15, as I mentioned, is where we are. What I want to do today, appreciate our stage hands, if you will, bringing this up. I'm going to put two words in front of you. I want you to think about them, and you'll notice this may not be a good sermon, but it sure will be a clear sermon. And you'll know that today I'm talking about these two words. They are complementary, but it may not seem like it by the way I preach from John 15. But these words complement each other, but we mess it up. And today, when it comes to the two words, they're both 10-letter words: production and connection. I want you to get this right. I meet so many people that are weary and wilted and worn out. They're ready or on the cusp of deconstructing. They're having lots of doubts. They don't feel like they're bearing fruit. Their lives are full of frustration. They're easily irritated. They're not being patient and kind. And I meet so many. I can be inflicted with it myself, where we're getting this wrong. So in John 15, when we come to this, we're going to get one of the great metaphors of the Bible that Jesus preaches, that the people of his day could really understand. I think we can as well, especially if you understand vineyards. And some of y'all are going to be opening up a bottle of fancy wine tonight. Don't act like you're not. And so we're going to take you to the vineyard today in John 15. But I want to ask the question, why do we put so much emphasis on production over connection? John 15 represents, I don't know if you know this, when Mariah was on the platform and she led us to silently read John 15 together, but these are some of the last words to his closest followers. And he says here, in John 13, he said, "You're going to be looking for me. I'm only going to be with you for a little while, and you're going to be looking for me, and I'm not going to be here." And this was on the eve of the Garden of Gethsemane. This is right before his arrest, and he's going to give them a mission. He says, "I'm leaving you, but I'm leaving you with a mission." By the way, that's probably important to ask. What is the mission? The mission is to go to all the earth and tell the good news. We would say that's an important mission, no mission like it, nothing more revolutionary in all the world. Billions of people could testify to that reality. I'm among them. I bet many of you are as well. Jesus gave a mission that love should change the world, that the gospel should free us from our chains and set us free. Go to all the earth. That's a daunting mission, and it would require, no one would dispute this, it would require significant work and sacrifice and hard labor. So what does Jesus do? Last words to his closest followers. He's leaving them, but he's leaving them with a mission. What does he do? Does he give them a pep talk? And he says, "Rise and grind, crank it out, hurry and hustle." He doesn't give them a pep talk. Well, maybe he gives them a performance plan with a job requirements and performance reviews and things like that, a comprehensive chart and graph, a plan for success, a 5-year plan. Jesus doesn't do that either. He doesn't give them a pep talk about rise and grind. He doesn't give them a corporate success, a 5-year plan. Jesus does what we don't do. John 15:5, this is our central passage in this great chapter. John 15:5 says this: "I am the vine, you are the branches. The one who remains in me and I in him produces much fruit." You may see one of our words here. "But because you can do nothing without me." Production versus connection. If I was giving someone a mission, I would do the pep talk. I would have the 5-year plan with all the details and charts and graphs. But Jesus does what we don't do, and what the American church in particular, any future leaders in the church out here, Jesus does what we don't do very well in the American church. He values connection over production, but we don't. So the question, why I can see some of you looking at me, you're hard-charging perfectionists. You're like, what's this guy preaching about today? I know. We all must produce. We'll get there. I know there's a weight of pressure, but why do we value production over connection? I'll give you a few reasons. Number one is results. We reward results. In the workplace, if you're about production, you get a promotion, you get a pay raise, you get praise from other people. All can be very good things. So we value production over connection, number one, because it's rewarded. That's what we reward. Another reason is that we would rather be bootstrap people than branches. God's the gardener, John 5. Follow Jesus' metaphor. God is the gardener. He knows what he's doing. We can trust him. Jesus is the vine, and we are the branches. But branches are dependent. But if you're a person who succeeded, you've produced, you've pulled yourself up by your own bootstraps. I did a little Merriam-Webster research, and here's what they say about the phrase, pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. By the way, it's funny. We say that, but no one can do it. It's physically impossible for a human being to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. It's when you, what does it mean? Without help from other people. As a result of one's own hard work, despite many obstacles, she has pulled herself up by her own bootstraps. That's so much better, isn't it, from a human standpoint than being a branch? Because if you're a branch, you have to admit that you need help. To be a branch is to say that I'm not fully sufficient. In fact, in many ways, I'm very insufficient. My adequacy is not from me, it's from outside. A branch needs another source. A branch needs to call on someone outside of themselves in order to get help. And so we value production over connection because production gets rewarded and because we'd rather be bootstrap people than admit that we're people that are like branches. And a third reason I believe that we value production more than connection is that it's easily measured. You can measure production, I think, more than connection. Let me illustrate if this helps. A man goes home after a hard day's work. His wife, she's coming home after a hard day's work. They're converging, which is a very sensitive time of the day for those of you who are married. She's had her stress, he's had his stress, and they make their way home, and he's got a thought. He's like, I could go on a walk with my wife, which I would enjoy and she would enjoy. He goes, or I could mow the lawn. Grass needs cutting. This man, if she lets him, has a choice. Go on a walk with my wife or mow the lawn. What does the man mostly do? The man, by default, if you were a betting person, what would you choose here? The man's going to mow the lawn. Why is the man going to mow the lawn? It's a good marriage, assume that in my illustration. He would enjoy the walk with the wife, but he's going to choose to mow the lawn, I think, more times than not, because you can measure the lawn. He can look at that lawn and go, freshly cut grass. And this time of year, you go, it smells good. And you can get a compliment from a neighbor, look at what I did. But if you go on a walk with your wife, you may enjoy that, but when you get back, you're right where you started. You went somewhere and you just came right back where there's nothing much to show for it. Which is strange, by the way. I'm stealing my own thunder here, getting ahead of myself, but going to church, attending small group, being present with the people that you love, there's no immediate reward for it. You know, we're like, what did I get out of it? What can I show? I can't point to but that's the good stuff. That's the deep stuff. That's the meaningful stuff. And here's my second point. We've asked the question, I've given you three reasons why we value production over connection. Because results are rewarded, because we would rather be bootstrap people than branches who have to say, I need help. I'm not good enough on my own. And then it's so easily measured, production is. But here's the thing. It's production that presses in on all of us every day. It's production. But it's connection that's eternal. The executive who was very successful and very loyal to his company has recently retired, and he's trying to make sense of why the company that he was so loyal to and gave his heart and soul to, why they have essentially forgotten about him. He missed church on Sundays because he didn't want to get behind at the office. He was invited for many years to a men's group on Thursday morning, but he said no because he wanted to be the first one at work. Oh, so many family meals he missed around the table because he was burning the oil at the office. On vacations, more recently, the last several years, he was on Zoom calls when he should have been with his family, splashing around the swimming pool. And now he retired from that company that he devoted his life to. And what do? They throw him a party, they give him a gold watch, and they move on without him. It's production that presses in on us, but it's connection that lasts for eternity. And so Jesus says to us, abide, remain, stay connected, because it's what matters more than anything else. I ran across this quote. It moved me. I hope it'll pluck the heartstrings of a few of you. Sometimes you're unsatisfied with your life while many people in this world are dreaming of your life. Can we get an amen already on that? A child on a farm sees a plane fly overhead and dreams of flying. But a pilot in the sky sees the farmhouse and dreams of returning home. That's life. Enjoy yours. If wealth is the secret to happiness, then the rich would be dancing in the streets, but only poor children do that. If power ensures security, then officials should walk unguarded. But those who live simply sleep soundly. If beauty and fame bring ideal relationships, then celebrity should have the best marriages. Live and love genuinely. It's connection. Now, it is production that presses you every day, but it's connection that's going to last for eternity. Y'all ever seen the show, you're going to laugh, What Would You Do? You ever seen that show? It's ABC's version of Hidden Camera. And by the way, point of note, that's kind of cool. Years ago, when the show was new, they filmed in our city. They filmed in Fondren. They filmed at Amerigo's, formerly known as Babalu. And it's pretty cool. So it's not just a hidden camera show, but it is a social experiment of sorts. And what they do is there's these paid actors. I don't know what they're paid, but they're good actors. They're really good actors. They can keep a straight face, and they say their lines and play their part really well. And they put these actors in a public space around ordinary, unsuspecting citizens or community people. And they construct a scenario that just, right? It just sucks you in. Susan and I have been drawn to this show many, many times. So we've seen episodes like a customer will be verbally abusive to a boy with Down syndrome, or a teenager's getting bullied for being different than other people. Or one of the more recent episodes of a job interviewer is in a public restaurant, and he's a white man, and he's interviewing a black lady for the job, and he tells her she can get the job, but she can't wear her hair like that. So the show is awkward, and it's painful, and it's suspenseful. And what you're doing is you're asking the question, like John, what's his name? You're saying, what would you do? And really, as you're drawn in, you're going, what are they going to do? And there's really a couple of choices there. They can hold their head down and ignore what's happening around them, or this show tests your ethical and moral convictions and courage, or you could speak up and stand up for what is right. So you're left watching the show going, what would you do? What are they going to do? You want to know, but deeper than the question, what are they going to do, is this question. What would you do? What would I do in this situation? And even deeper than what would I do is this. What type of person am I? Because you feel like you're watching people, ordinary, unsuspecting citizens, in a public place with paid actors tricking them. But these scenarios make you look at them with some judgment, and you say, what type of person are they? Because how they act here is going to tell me what kind of person they are. And you're getting sassy on your couch while you're eating onion dip right out of the container, wondering what type of people they are. But hey, what type of person are you? Because how we live in this world. So here's my thing. This question, what would you do, when we read John 15, I want you to pretend. In fact, I have this question on our screen. Pretend with me, if you will. If you were God, what would you do with you? Now, that's a strange question. If it's your first time at Fondren Church, I believe that there is a God and that you're not God, okay? We hang our hat on those two linchpins of theology. There is a God, you're not God, but just pretend for a second. If you were God, what would you do with you? And here's why I ask. Look at John 15:2. This is sort of a troubling part of the metaphor about God being the gardener, Jesus being the vine, and you and I being the branches. Every branch in me that does not produce fruit, he removes. And he prunes every branch that produces fruit so that it will produce more fruit. The first part I want you to focus on because it seems problematic. There is a cutting off. There's a final judgment. There's a separation. There's heaven and hell. But here Jesus is talking to the believer, his closest followers, and he wants them to get a picture of God as the gardener, him as the vine, and them, thus you and I, as the branches. So if you were God, what would you do with you? Very interesting question. Now, you're not God and I'm not God. None of us are close. Isaiah 55 puts it this way. God's ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. We don't know what God knows. We don't see what God sees. We don't sit where he sits. We're not God. But if we were, what would you do with you? What level of triggering or canceling or blocking would you have in your life? To answer this question more honestly, if you were God, what would you do with you? Think about your life and your phone. If we were, and I hate it when folks pull out their phones during church and are distracted by it, but if we were to be having coffee together later today and we pull out our phones, I bet we could show each other in our vulnerable moment that we both have blocked contacts. We have calls that we block. Now, most of them are telemarketers. They're those unwanted calls. We blocked them. But if we're honest, we have on our phones other people that we blocked. The coworker who started the rumor about us, the ex that we dare not even mention their name, the extended family member who wouldn't respect boundaries, the neighbor we no longer talk to, the sibling that we've lost a relationship with, the service repairman who lied and cheated us out of money. What do? We block them. We remove them. They're out of our world. So to answer the question, if you were God, what would you do with you? I think that gives us a little insight into what you might do with you if you were God. Because you and I block people. Let me be honest. I said this at the first service. I've got a few blocked. I've blocked a couple of y'all. A couple of people at the 9:30 service. I blocked them. But we have this, don't we? Because what? If someone hurts you, if someone takes advantage of you, if someone constantly wants something from you, we block them. And so I don't want you to get this picture of God, because Jesus doesn't. That if you're not bearing much fruit, if you're weary and wilted and worn out and you've created a mess and things aren't going well for you and you've ignored God and you're living on your own, that God says, I'm just going to remove you. In fact, God is saying, hey, I want to pick you up. I want to pick you up and I want to show you my love. I want to invite you as the vine. I want to invite you into deeper connection with me. And let me prove that. Y'all ever wonder why preachers and Bible students go to seminary and apply themselves to the languages? Dr. Jimmy Stewart, a medical doctor and one of the best, was preaching a few Sundays ago and handled some Hebrew words very well. But he admitted up here, I appreciated his humility. He's like, I'm not a Hebrew scholar, but he worked his way through the Hebrew words. But you can learn the original languages of the Bible if you apply yourself in seminary. And sometimes our English translations leave us a little short. And that's what's happened in John 15 too, when it appears that Jesus is removing us, that he's blocking us, he's canceling us. He's saying, you have caused me trouble, I'm done with you. But actually in the Greek, there's this word, and I want you to see it. It's iro. And iro is a word that's a common Greek word in the New Testament. It's used 26 times in the Gospel of John alone. I want to show you two in a minute. But iro has a couple of different meanings with its common usage. It can mean this. It can mean, when Jesus says remove in John 15:2, iro is this. I can cut you off, or I can pick you up. Now, this word in John 15:2 is the same two words used in these passages in John. Look at John 5:8, I believe it is. Get up, Jesus told him, to the paralytic man. Get up and what? Iro, pick up your mat and walk. He's not saying cut off, he's saying pick up iro. Here's another one. The Jewish leaders, remember, they came and they arrested him and killed him. Again, the Jews picked up rocks to stone him. They picked it up. So in John 15:2, I want you to know this. If you're a believer in Jesus and you've sinned and your life is a mess, Jesus is not looking at you saying, I'm cutting you off. He's saying, I want to pick you up. In your mess, in your disobedience, and where you have fallen, where you're experiencing shame and regret right now, Jesus is saying from this beautiful passage in John, the red letters of Jesus, he's saying, I want to pick you up. Iro, I want to pick you up. Let's say that you are a teenage daughter and your dad has been talking to you about getting a car. You get your driver's license, he's got a car for you, he's paying for a lot of it. So with that comes responsibility. The government is conferring upon you at 16 years old that you can drive metal and glass, hundreds of pounds of metal and glass at high speeds. Take care of yourself. Take care of other motorists. Take care of this vehicle. Change the oil and make sure you have gas. And many dads tell their teenage daughters when they get their driver's license, don't let the tank get halfway down. Fill it up and keep your car. And he sees from time to time, because he's checking on you, that you've let the gas tank get too low. And then one day it happens. That dad gets a phone call from his teenage daughter. He can barely hear her voice. The muzzled sound of her voice in the midst of the cars humming by her on the interstate. In fact, it's so muzzled, he can't hear her. He wants to, but he hangs up and he texts her. And here's what he says, back to our Greek word. He sends his teenage daughter the text. She's 16 years old. She's only been driving a few months. And he says, I will arrow you. I will arrow you. I will arrow you. Now, what does he mean? There's two meanings in the Greek. Either he's going to cut her off or he's going to pick her up. And I think you would agree, all of us would agree, that's a significant difference. If he's saying, I'm going to pick you up, as Jesus is saying in John 15:2 to the believer in Jesus, that's really good news. Help is on the way. Isn't that a different feeling? Help is on the way is very different than my dad is furious with me. That's significantly different. Preacher metaphor. You're the teenage daughter. You're the stranded motorist. You're the one who's ignored your father. You're the one who thought you could do things your way. You're the one who created the mess. And how you view your father at this point is everything. And what is he saying to you? And maybe you had a preacher, a hometown preacher, or a parent whose voice with God's truth was so loud and their voice with God's grace was just a whisper. And you need to hear today that God's grace is for you, that he doesn't want to cut you off. Jesus doesn't want to cut you off. He wants to pick you up. He wants to lift you up. He wants to be there for you. And so your view of God comes into play. Can I call out to my Father? Will he be there for me? Because I wasn't producing like I should have produced. In fact, I made a mess of things. But Jesus is saying, our Father, the gardener, and me, the vine, we value connection. And so we can call to him. He's going to be there for us when we make the call to him. So your view of God really matters. Now Jesus, so that's John 15:2, just theological clarity with incredible practical implications. Jesus, when he says remove, he's saying pick you up. He said, I see something there. I see the connection lost. I'm going to pick you up and clean you up. And by the way, the gospel, can we preach the gospel from time to time around here? The message is not, and American Christians and Mississippi people steeped in religion mess this up continuously. We think if I clean myself up, I've got to call AAA. I got to get the stranded motorist, insurance card, and they got to come and fill my tank up, and then I go to my Father. Romans 5:8, but God, do you know this? But God demonstrates his love toward us while we were yet sinners. It's come. It's call out. No matter what happened in your life, no matter your struggles, no matter your addictions and anxieties and depressions and things that you battle with, come and be a part and gather with God's people, and let's value connection above all else. What's your view of God? But he does say, he's saying this. He's saying, I'm not cutting you off, but he's cutting. He's cutting. Cut is almost never a good word. If you say cut, 98% of the time, bad connotations. I was shaving my pretty face this morning and I cut myself. Down at the workplace, they're cutting back and cutting some workers. We were on vacation, something bad happened, we had to cut our trip short. Inflation, economy is not good no matter what those politicians are telling you. The prices are up and we are cutting back on our spending. So-and-so so sarcastic. When they speak to me, I feel so cut down. Man, the world is just against me. No one's cutting me any slack. I could go on. I'm kind of a words guy. But cutting is never good. But listen, in John 15, cutting, though it can be painful, is so very good. It's so good for your soul. Everybody knows, I hope you know, it's part of our statement of faith at Fondren Church, the 80s are the superior decade. So the 80s music, 80s movies, number one. If you want to work your way into my heart and favor with me, not that you would, but 80s are the way to go. Speak to me in 80s songs and 80s movies and all that. You recognize these two? The movie is what? The movie is Karate Kid. I'll use their stage names. This is Mr. Miyagi and Daniel-san. And I love one of my favorite scenes. I won't show it or talk much about it, but one of my favorite scenes is when Daniel walks in. He's walking into his karate instructor and his life mentor. And he walks in, and Mr. Miyagi is killing flies with chopsticks, which is bad to the bone. And if you were a boy or a man in the 80s, or whenever you saw this movie, you probably tried that at home. Can I get that admission from you? You tried killing flies with chopsticks. It ain't easy. But there's another scene where Danielson walks in and he catches his karate trainer, life mentor, and Mr. Miyagi is around a bonsai tree. And anybody remember what he's doing? I think Peter Cetera is about to sing The Glory of Love. It's a real crescendo type moment. But there's this bonsai tree, which are small trees, and he's cutting the tree. He's pruning the tree, John 15:2. And Danielson walks in. He's like, what are you doing? He's troubled by it. He's curious about it. Mr. Miyagi tells him, he's like, hey, you do it, Daniel. Daniel doesn't want to do it because he's afraid he'll mess up the tree. Bonsai trees, there's been bonsai trees to sell for more than $1 million in Japan and places pretty crazy. But he's pruning, and he doesn't want to prune. Daniel's son doesn't want to do it, and so he says, hey, close your eyes. And he says this. He goes, think only tree. And what he's doing is, it's really beautiful. He's asking his mentee to get a mental picture of the potential of the tree. You with me? And here's what Jesus is saying to us. This is really good. God is the gardener. I am the vine, Jesus, and you, me and you, we're the branches. And he's saying God has a beautiful picture of your potential. Which is the reason I hate when and I've been guilty, especially when I was young, just to suck in the lies of the enemy, who's like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. He's an accuser of the brethren. He wants us to believe all these lies and to believe that God's not for us, and he has these archaic, random rules to prohibit us from having fun in life. Is so wrong. God has this beautiful picture of the future you. He sees the potential in you. Well, preacher, I'm going through a divorce. Preacher, I've got this nasty addiction. Preacher, I have all this shame. He has a beautiful picture of who he wants you to be. He sees your potential, and pruning makes so much sense if we realize God is a cutter with sovereign scissors, and he wants to remove things from our lives. What might he want to remove? Let me give you 3 things. He wants to remove, he wants to cut. I think more times than not, because he's a pruner, he's the great gardener, and he has a mental picture of your future. He wants to let things get cut out of our lives. And if it's diseased or dying, can I just say, man, that's a good thing. That's a really good thing. In the church, behind the stage with the bright lights, we circle up, and there are some groups expressly committed to this very purpose of my secret was exposed. And I'm bringing what was dark into the light. God's pruning me. He's cutting some things out. So number 1, he's going to cut out what's diseased or dying. Number 2, he's going to cut out what's distracting. If you go to a vineyard, you'll see sucker shoots. If you look at vines and branches, you'll see sucker shoots. And sucker shoots don't produce life. You know what sucker shoots do? They're right there at the hinge point. And you know what they do? They steal nutrients from the branches and the vines. They're just distractions. Here's my point. There's some things in your life and mine, they're not inherently bad, but they're distractions. Take a look at this video, no sound, but this is a cub. You'll see a cub, and the mother has walked across the road already. You'll see the mom making her way. She's leading the way, and what's the little cub doing? No one knows where this is going to end, right? He didn't have time to do what mama says. And there we go. That balloon got pruned from his life. Just a red balloon. Nobody's against red balloons, right? I hope you're not. Nothing wrong with a red balloon, but it's just a distraction for the little bear. It's just something that got in his way. And I talk to people all the time, some people this week. Look, these aren't bad things. We're not offering harsh judgment to you, but I've talked to people who said, hey, I have an obsession with the news. And I wake up every morning and I look at the news, and I go to bed and I look at the news, and all throughout the day when some news happens, breaking news, I succumb to that. I look at it, and I actually think one of these candidates for office is going to heal our land and be our Savior. And I have this obsession. It may not be inherently evil, but it sure is a red balloon. It sure is a distraction. Another friend said, hey, for us, it's travel ball. Man, we're missing church. We're not connecting as a family. We're spending too much money on the road. We've been at each other. We're at the opposing team. We're at our own players. Man, travel ball for us, not inherently evil, but it's been a distraction. It's been a red balloon for us. It could be streaming Netflix or surfing, scrolling Instagram or watching all the YouTube short videos. Not inherently evil things, but just distractions. God wants to prune distractions out of your life. So he wants to prune what's dead, diseased, or dying. He wants to prune what's distracting. And thirdly, this is kind of weird. He wants to prune what's healthy. Some things that are good in your life. That seems kind of counter, but read John 15. It says it in the metaphor. Jesus says, hey, I want you to be, and this is a picture. It gets closer to the picture. Look at John 15:8 as we get close to the home here. My Father is glorified by this, that you produce much fruit and prove to be my disciples. You know, one of the reasons I'm a Christian is, keep that passage up if you would upstairs. This is so beautiful to me. Can I just make sure everybody knows, or at least you entertain the thought of believing that it's about the Father's glory. It's not about your glory. In fact, the people, if you want a life of misery, make it about your glory. It's about the Father's glory, but here's what's so great. The Father's glory is our joy. I'm preaching that so you may have joy, that my joy might be in you, my joy might remain in you, that my joy may be full. When God is getting the most glory from my life, I'm the most joyful. That doesn't mean circumstances line up happily all the time, but the deepest joy is knowing that the Father gets glory. This is the picture that he has for us. And there are things, verses 2 and verse 5, along with verse 8, form this picture of that there are good things, but he's going to take some good things out because he has better things. Now, we mess that up sometimes because we meet our friend Sally for lunch, and Sally tells us that Johnny broke up with her. And what do we say to Sally? She's a Christian sister, and we say, well, God's removed Johnny, but he's got Danny, and Danny's better, and Danny's waiting 2 weeks later. We make it like that. It's not always that way because there's a lot of waiting in life. There's a lot of hard, patient endurance waiting in the Christian life. People don't preach that much anymore. We need to. But you have to wait. But God has something better for you. And so he's going to prune and cut. God is not removing. He's not cutting you off in Christ. He would never do that. He's picking you up. But he will remove and cut off things in our lives that are diseased or dying or distracting us or that are good today, but God has something better tomorrow for us. So here's what I would challenge you with. It's another Greek word used in this passage in John 15, 12 to 17 a couple of times. Aleon. Aleon is a word that's used in a series of commands in the Scripture about one another. One another, one another, one another. And he says in John 15, greater love has no man than this, that one lays down. We're going to take communion as we close in a minute. Greater love has no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. The church is terribly confused in a political age. Can I tell you that Jesus wants us to wash feet? Jesus wants us to serve people. Jesus wants us to win argument. No, Jesus wants us to love our neighbor and love our enemy and lay down our life for other people. And this aleon is us saying, Jesus, we want to follow you. We want to live out the one another's. This is obvious, but I think we miss the obvious a lot of times. Jesus says, God's the gardener, verse 1. I'm the vine, you're the branches. But did you get that? Jesus doesn't say, you're the branch. Don't leave church today going, I'm the branch. Because Jesus doesn't say that. Jesus says, you are the branches. Let me put it this way. It's not a table for two with Jesus and a one-on-one conversation. This is Jesus in the locker room addressing the team. And you and I are branches together. And if you go to one of these wineries, you'll see that there's trestles, that branches and vines are tied together purposely. They're woven together. Not like weeds, which uncontrolled, but there's a purpose there because one can draw sustenance off the other. This is us together saying we are branches together. We are branches together. Would you stand with me? And I'm going to close the sermon and give us instructions before we leave today, before we take communion. And I want to ask you, as you're alert, attuned to what we're saying, I want to ask you if there's something that God needs to prune away from you. And here's the tricky thing. You ever had like a rose bush and then a landscaper comes over? And you see the landscaper like cutting the rose off the rose bush. And what do? You're like, ah! And you're like, don't cut the rose. And the landscaper knows what they're doing. The landscaper is a landscaper. The landscaper is probably went to Mississippi State. And is telling you, hey, I know what I'm doing here. And he does know what he's doing. He's cutting something back that seems good, but he's cutting and it hurts. And cutting always seems bad, but when we give God the sovereign scissors to our lives, there's something beautiful that can happen. And so my question is, will you let him cut? Will you open the invitation to be able to do that? Because if not, you get the chainsaw. And I Googled this, what's the number one best-selling, highest-priced Mississippi chainsaw? And it's this steel. It's the Farm Boy steel chainsaw. And it can cut heavy. And it knocks down big things. And here's my point. When we open our lives, because you see, by definition, connection is continual. I stood with her 28 years ago on a stage out in California in a church, at a Lutheran church, and said, I take you. That was cool that we did that. We said these words, but man, we got to keep doing that. We got to keep connecting through the years and all the changes. It's the same way with Jesus. He's saying, stay connected with me, and pruning is a continual thing. It's a consistent thing where we invite the scissors of God so he doesn't have to whip out the chainsaw and bring in the heavy equipment. And man, listen to me, you don't want that. It hurts. And I've had it happen, man. I've had it happen, and it hurts. So does Jesus care about production? He said that you'll bear fruit. It'll be fruit that remains. It'll be fruit that changes the world. He really cares. In John 14:12, we didn't get to this last week, but he said, you'll do greater things than me. Is that curious to anybody? Because I read that, and I'm like, man, greater things than Jesus? Like, Jesus got that wrong. He raised the dead. Anybody raise the dead? No. But here's what he means. He was right, because he's always right. And Jesus said, you'll do greater things. 40 days later, and after that, Peter stood up in Acts 2 and preached, and 3,000 people came to Jesus. No, there was never an incident in Jesus' day where 3,000 people came to Jesus. Any preachers in the house? I'm a preacher. That's a good day at the office. 3,000 people come to Jesus. Acts chapter 5, guess what? 5,000 people come to Jesus. Do you know this, that in the last 120 years, more people have come to faith in Jesus Christ, more people have become Christians in the last 120 years than the first 1,500 years. Jesus was right. Greater things would happen. So yeah, he cares about fruit. But this is what we got to get right. First and last and always, that we remain in him. So today you're invited to the table to follow the person in front of you if you're a believer in Jesus. Take the bread and take the juice. Go back to your seat, and your timing over the next few minutes as Lauren sings a song over us, and you're invited to join in your voices. It's maybe a newer song, but it talks about the exact words in the metaphor that Jesus gives us, the vine and the branches. And so today, as you come, would you take a moment as a believer to worship and to think, to let in your mind to think, God, what do you want to prune? What do you want to prune in me? Thank you, Jesus. This is my prayer in the first service. Thank you that you don't want to cut me off, but you do want to cut things out of my life. You want to pick me up and clean me up. And that's the message of the gospel. And that is good news.